Last week we spoke of Christ's return, Christ's promised return, and this week our focus is on heaven. The question that led to our study today was asked, are there pets in heaven? Do our pets who have died, do they get to go to heaven? Will we find them there when we get there? And of course, most of what the Bible doesn't say, or does say, isn't about specifics, as you all have been finding out, but what it feels like to be in heaven. Our gospel today is from Revelation, written by John of Patmos, a little bit farther into the book than last week, and it is a beautiful example of what we envision heaven to be. So this is from Revelation 21, verses 1 through 7. Then I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. To those who conquer will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." This is the story of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Now we have 1,000 different answers for what it looks like to be in heaven, for what heaven looks like. I want you to think about it. When you think about heaven, what do you think of? Do you think of castles on clouds, as many of us do? Do you think of a city of gold? Or maybe, everybody that's writing in the Bible about heaven is writing from Jerusalem. So they're imagining Jerusalem in a new way. But, I grew up on the prairie, so to me, heaven, of course, has to be some open fields with quite a bit of grass and definitely a little bit of wind. That sunset that God paints has always been some of God's most beautiful to me. Now, when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies, now you're going to laugh at this a little bit, was called The Little Princess. Anybody ever seen it? Comes from an old book. No? Okay, a couple of you. Goodness. Well, for many reasons, I loved this movie. The main character's name is Sara, and I might be I know. I could see myself in the movie. It worked out. It's about a little girl and her dad. I loved my daddy. I wanted to be a princess like any other person. At this point in the story, Sarah's a very rich young girl in boarding school while her father is serving in World War I. Now, she comes upon one of the younger girls having a temper tantrum because she misses her mother who has just died. And she, who having lost her mother at an even younger age, describes heaven in a way that always stuck with me. She says to this little girl, "I don't have a mother either. She's in heaven with my baby sister, but that doesn't mean I can't talk to her. I talk to her all the time. I tell her everything, and I know she hears me because that's what angels do. And my mom is an angel, and so is yours, with beautiful satin wings, a silk dress, and a crown of baby rosebuds. And they all live together in a castle. And do you know what the castle is made of? Sunflowers. Hundreds of them, so bright they shine like the sun." Now this is, of course, a simple, fanciful dream for a young girl missing her mother. It is similar to what we imagine heaven to be like. A beautiful place where our loved ones are. A place that hosts those in our lives we love, that we know they are happy together with God. A place that we know they aren't far from us. But Sarah's point of returning to relationships, of beauty, of peace, of comfort is exactly the message we get in the New Testament. In the New Testament, we speak of mourning turning into dancing. And I can't help but think of those like my grandfather or others I've known who lost the ability to dance due to age or illness, and then now can dance again. That'll always be the thought I hear when I hear those words. But at the Last Supper, Jesus told his disciples that he went to prepare a place for them, a place of peace. And in that moment of teaching, Jesus spoke of a place with many rooms. Now, we, of course, have translated that into a castle, a mansion. We've dreamed it into so many different styles of architecture and beauty. But what Christ meant was that there was plenty of room. Room for all who loved God. Like many things about faith in God, heaven is in reality a mystery. The details aren't specific, and truthfully, I'm thankful for that. Because if we have the details get clouded. But I think we can reason out a few things about heaven and who God is. First of all, we know that God will be there. And what great joy is in that. For in our presence with God, we will fully know what we've only experienced in part of the great wonder and joy that is a relationship with God. This understanding we have of God in our lives will be so much greater in heaven. And so will pets be there? I don't know for sure. But I do know that for many in our relationships with our pets, just as our relationship with others in our lives, we glimpse God's presence. So to me, of course, our pets will be there because they are in some ways some of the best of God's creation. Will there be streets of gold? Maybe. I don't really care. Give me streets of wildflowers, as I said, and the voice of God singing me home. It is a dream to think about heaven. It is a beautiful understanding. Artists spend much of their lives talking about heaven. The number of songs that we have that talk about heaven, that speak about heaven so beautifully, abound. It's amazing. Jansen he couldn't decide which ones to sing this week. There are so many good ones. But what does this beautiful dream do for us, the living? Well, on one level, when we say goodbye to those we love, we know we are saying goodbye, but we are also saying see you later. We are sending them off to a place that we know is filled with God's love. And we know that it tells us there is something of beauty and hope and comfort in the face of the scariest thing in our lives, death. We fear death because we're not sure what it is. But we have faith in what God tells us, that we will go home. That in death, just as in life, we are with God, and that God will make all things well. I often speak that at the moment of death, we find ourselves embraced by God, in a heavenly hug, in arms so big we cannot even find ourselves, welcomed home to find everlasting peace in the arms of our Creator. In a few minutes, we are going to participate in the two sacraments of the Methodist tradition. We will begin with baptism. A baptism as we celebrate the joining of Alex into God's eternal family. As we celebrate the transforming love of God that transcends all that he will face in this life and beyond. And after that, we will come together in communion, a meal that has gathered Christians together for 2,000 years, a meal that we remember that death is not the end. And so while we don't know the details of what heaven looks like, and we don't know what it means, and the number of questions as people try to figure out the details, well, what happens to time? What happens to our bodies? What happens to our minds, our relationships, all of these things? We don't know. But we know that God is with us, that God loves us, and that is stronger than anything else. So let us find joy in our lives. Let us find comfort in knowing that those we've lost are with God and have a joy we could never know. And let us find hope as we move toward our futures and what that means for us and those in our lives. That God is with us. God is with us here, and yet we feel it only partly. And yet, in beyond, in life, in death, in heaven, nothing can separate us from God. And so God is so much greater than we could ever know. I look forward to figuring it out, in 70 years.